One thing that we went over the last stream in regards to drums, right? This is going to be more of like an educational thing here. I'm going to pull up some breaks. If you guys aren't familiar with breaks, they are parts of these funk records where pretty much all the instruments drop out to give shine on the drums. The drums get to solo out, right? So I'm going to pull up probably 5 of the most quintessential breaks that you should know and that you should study if you're trying to learn how to program your drums in a certain way. Like if you're trying to do boom bap, I feel like these are the drums to use. First and foremost, the one that I'm going to start out with is Impeach the President by the Honey Drippers. If that does not sound familiar to you, it definitely will in just a second. So this right here. Everybody should know this break right here. It's one of the most sampled drum breaks in the history of all drum breaks.
And they just got back from Washington, D.C. I think they got something they want to say.
And of course, the classic sample to go along with it. So this drum break has been used in so many freaking songs, right? And it's a very simple pattern.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the Honey Drippers in the house tonight.
Like, you don't have to go crazy with boom bap drums. As a matter of fact, the whole root and the whole origins of boom bap came from these breaks. You know what I mean? So these breaks right here, this is what kind of started hip hop. You know what I mean? Like, it was Kool Herc looping these breaks. Not this one in particular, but finding these open drums on these records, throwing them on at the party. That's how b-boying got started. Hence the name break dance, dancing on the break. You know what I mean? So that's where everything would cut out, and it would just be these crazy ass drum solos, and they would be so funky that people would just be getting down and really just wilding out on the floor. So Impeach the President, I would say, is like probably the number one break that everybody should know, right? The next one, I would say, let's go with this one right here. There we go. It's a simple, straightforward loop, straightforward pattern. Just a couple of ghost notes. That's all it is, right? Couple of ghost notes. Very simple pattern, but this is quintessential. Every like boom bap beat kind of follows this pattern right here. You know what I mean? So like I said, super duper simple. There's nothing crazy. There's nothing crazy in this break. But you'll notice even nowadays, like Griselda, Alchemist, Derringer, like all these people use that pattern as their drums in even modern day boom bap. Some of the hardest beats ever use this exact pattern. You don't have to go super crazy on it. You can if you want to, but even something as simple as this, the drum break from Get Out My Life Woman by Lee Dorsey. This is absolute classic. Everybody should know this, study it, master that pattern. Learn how to play that, because once you master these basic patterns, you can manipulate and flip it and really add some of your own flavor, some of your own spices to these patterns, right? And it all stems from very basic straight through drums. They just have their own swing. You know, you pick the right drum sounds. You don't have to overthink it when it comes to drums. So I think this is getting a little bit more advanced, but I think this is another good one to kind of study. So this is where you start getting a little bit more funky with it, right? We got the Barry White break. So this is another example of something that it's not incredibly difficult to play those drums. I'm going to just open up the other beat that we had before, so you guys can kind of hear once I break it down, right? So the first two, we had Impeach the President, we had Get Out My Life Woman. Very similar drum breaks. It's just that Impeach the President has the open hi-hat in there, right? Get Out My Life Woman, just straight through, no open hi-hat, no variation. It's just the kick, the snares, the hi-hat, and the ghost notes. That's all it is, right? So if we take the same concept with this Barry White joint, right? It's from a record called I'm Gonna Love You Just a Little Bit More, Baby. Let's kind of break down the drum section here. Whoa. So if we break it down, right? Literally, this is what the kick and snare pattern is. Very simple. Snares on the 2 and the 4 always. There's no ghost notes on the snare, but there's ghost notes on the kick. So boom, 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 boom. That's it, right? And then the hi-hat is what does most of the heavy lifting. The hi-hat makes it sound funky, right? Listen to the hi-hat. So you can always break down these breaks, strip them down to the essentials, and then you can always build from there. So like this is a very like simple pattern. Like it sounds more intricate because the hi-hats are carrying, right? The hi-hats add that funk, add that busyness. Yeah. The hi-hats can change everything, bro. It's something very simple. Very simple with the hi-hats. Getting into a little bit more stuff right here. I'm going to pick these last two, right? We have a Lou Donaldson drum break. This is the Ode to Billy Joe. We've all heard this drum break used so many times. Right? So a lot of ghost notes on the snare on this break, right? But we notice there's a lot of snare notes being hit in between the 2 and the 4. And of course the drum roll in between as well. So that's essentially what it is, right? Super simple, right? But it can get intricate with those ghost notes, with the rolls and shit. But it's a very funky, very loose drum break. And then just to hear it like applied in something that came out recently, Madlib used it perfectly on Sound Ancestors. And then if you notice in Madlib's version, right, the way Madlib used it is that he layered that little clap sound right before the snare hits, right? So that's how he changed it up. These breaks, they still get used, they're still referenced, they're still transposed, they're still replayed to this day. You know what I mean? So the last one I'm going to pull up here, it's also a very classic break. But these are all patterns that you should know and study. Kind of similar ghost notes to the Barry White break, but you notice that the drums are not as fast, or the hi-hats are not as fast, but they also added that open hi-hat on there as well. So You know what I mean? So you could just add little change up. So very similar patterns, completely different feels because they change one or two things, right? So like I said, same ghost notes as the Barry White joint, but the hi-hat pattern can change that the whole feel and the groove of it too. And just to hear that particular break used in modern boom bap, we can go to this right here. Woo! And this shit is hype as fuck, bro. And all they did was loop that break. So these breaks, these records, they still have a lot of prevalence to this day. They're used very effectively to this day. So I think those are the 5 breaks that I think every person, every producer that's trying to make boom bap, I think you guys should be very familiar front and back. You should know those breaks like the back of your hand. You should be able to play those patterns perfectly. Those are the top 5 breaks that I would consider like pretty much the patterns you're going to use, albeit with different sounds, different variations. But those are the base patterns that you're going to use when you're producing boom bap beats. And you could hear it on modern day shit. The only thing that's going to change it, and very effectively, is what kind of sounds you use. So that's very, very important, is using quality sounds, knowing how to process those sounds, learning how to make it sound dusty if you need to, or making them sound super bright and clean if you need to. You know what I'm saying? I would say for the most part, when you're producing boom bap, your drums are going to be more on the dusty side. You're going to make it a little bit dusty, fuzzy, you know, a little bit lo-fi, but like the actual lo-fi, like in the sense of low fidelity. You know what I mean? So you're going to probably process it more on that end. I would say pop records usually use more like brighter and louder processing when it comes to the drums, but like actual boom bap, like for example, like look at Alchemist. Like Alchemist drums, very simple patterns, very simple concepts, but he pulls it off well because he knows how to sculpt the soundscape. If you can figure out how to sculpt the atmosphere within your beats, you can really take people into that world. Like, so when you have like Boldy James or like Earl Sweatshirt or, you know, the cats from Griselda rhyming over Alchemist beats, it sounds that way and it makes you feel like you're actually there because he knows how to sculpt that environment out of the sounds that he's using, the samples that he's using, the drums that he's using, the way that he processes everything. You know what I mean? So very important to learn those things as well. I think for what I'm teaching today and what I'm kind of going over today is more just kind of on the basic level, like the entry level when you're getting into it and you're just kind of learning the patterns, learning the history, learning the breaks. Go through these records, man. Go through these records. They're great records just to listen to in general, but I mean, there's a lot of gems. You're going to hear a lot of samples that you've heard, very famous samples, very famous drum loops, very famous bass lines, very famous horns, keys, all that stuff, right? Everything comes from these old records.